Welcome to the Edge of Greatness podcast. The path to greatness is never linear and requires patience and consistency. Join us on our journey as we peel back the layers of success, searching for that elusive core. Each week we will explore a different component of greatness, utilizing experts who have traveled some part of the path that we are all on. We aim to uncover insights into the areas of leadership, coaching, performance, overcoming failure, the power of habits, and so much more. We are all on the edge of greatness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I am joined by Josh. I apologize, Josh. I didn't even ask how to pronounce your last name. Is it Bonhotal?
Bonhotal.
Bonhotal. Okay, I was way off.
Yep. It's close enough.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at it going, wait a minute, shoot. I probably should have asked how to pronounce that first. But Josh is a very highly regarded strength coach and is currently working as the head performance director at, is it Future Fit app? Is that correct?
Future. Yeah.
Just Future. Okay.
Just Future.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay. Overseeing all of their coaches. He was also previously the director of sports performance for Purdue men's basketball, which while he was there, they were perennially in the top 25, earned 2 Sweet 16 appearances, had multiple All-Americans. And then also before that, Josh was with the Chicago Bulls in the NBA as part of their strength and conditioning staff and worked with people like Derrick Rose while he was Rookie of the Year and MVP in 2009 and 2011. And then also was part of the 62-win season, 2011, 2012. So I am very excited to have him on with us today. And thank you so much for taking some time to talk with my guests.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So curious question for me. Obviously at the basketball world, you played basketball before? You were at the Bulls in Purdue?
You said, did I play basketball before?
Yeah, were you a basketball player prior to your time with the Bulls in Purdue?
I think it depends on, what your definition of a basketball player was. In my mind, I was, but, I grew up and not too far from Chicago, right in the heart of the Jordan era. So, I mean, it was pretty natural. I was a diehard Bulls fan and really my entire life revolved around basketball. I mean, I was that kid where, we had a hoop on my garage. It'd be below zero, all kinds of snow on the ground, and I'd be out there, shooting for hours and, taking my gloves off so I could get a better feel on the ball. And, my hands are like getting frostbite. But yeah, I mean, that's really what started me down my path was, I was that annoying kid who you couldn't tell any different. Like I was going to play for the Bulls one day, and I was also that kid that sort of didn't wake up to the reality of it. That I as much in my head that I thought I was a pretty good player. There was a pretty big gap between me and the NBA. But, fortunately for me, I was at least smart enough to kind of figure out that, I should at least have a backup plan, and have another way in. And, I kind of fell in love with the process of, training and kind of really working at your craft to improve. So not just obviously everything that went into being on the court and, working on your skills, getting shots up, everything like that. But the physical training and, really, I didn't know anything at all what I was doing, but I was just going, from the time I was in probably grade school, I was going in and like lifting on machines and like going for run, and in hindsight, it's like, why was I going for, 5-mile runs and all this stuff? And, but I thought it was helping me for basketball. But just kind of fell in love with that process of the preparation, and, came to find out that that was actually a real job, and that was a way, in. So it was, kind of late high school, early college, where, I really just started studying the paths of people who were in positions that I hope to one day get to, and what had they done, how had they gotten there, and I just, started to kind of follow some of those commonalities, whether it was sources that they'd learned from or people putting out content themselves, and back then content was, it was books and training DVDs.
Right.
I'm getting old here, so we didn't have, none of the, none of the advantages.
You were finding people
today,
on Twitter.
So, yeah,
Right.
Exactly. But just kind of, beat down doors and bugged anybody and everybody that I could, anybody that knew more than me, which, especially at the time, was literally every single person I came in contact with. So just, even going to the YMCA in my hometown, like, who were the biggest, strongest people in there, and like I was going to wear them out with questions. I was going to watch them. I was going to ask them questions. Who are the, like, 80, 90-year-old people still coming in, working out every single day and, fit and healthy. I was going to ask them questions and learn from them. And, and it's just kind of one of those where you continue to do that. You continue to build relationships, and take advantage of the opportunities that those relationships, present for you. And it becomes a snowball effect from there.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it's really cool. Your journey to the strength world kind of sounds similar to mine, because I was a big basketball player and baseball player, but nobody could have told me otherwise. I was going to go pro. I'm going to be the guy who makes it pro in something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I graduated college with a history degree, which does nothing, because I didn't realize that fitness was something that I could pursue. So afterwards, I was like, where can I learn? What can I do? How much can I grow?
Right.
But you still made it to the Chicago Bulls, though. So I mean, technically, you made it to the NBA. So
exactly. Hey, I'm in the team photos, so
there you go. That's pretty exciting right there. So I heard recently you were talking, again, it was one of your Twitter posts, but you, Al Vermeil was one of your early mentors. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely insane. That's incredible. Cause, I read a lot of his stuff, cause he's obviously one of the first in the beginning starts of like the strength coaching world, and all of his insights and stuff. So tell me a little bit about that time. Cause I'm really kind of curious how that worked out for you.
Yeah. So, that was, that was right out of college. And I was very fortunate just through all of the different opportunities that, I sought out throughout college in particular. One thing led to the next, which resulted in me my last year at Wisconsin working with all the teams as a student assistant. They didn't have any interns, so I'd literally bugged them for 3 years straight and repeatedly. And it was Scott Henbach, who was the basketball strength coach at the time. He was always gracious enough to like allow me to come in every few months and observe a session. And every single time at the end of that session, I would ask, like, hey, can I help out? Can I observe? Can I whatever? And the answer was always no, but he was always open, to have me come back a couple months later. So I just continue bugging him. But the nice thing about it was, when he finally said yes, because there was no internship there were no interns, there was nothing. He and the other two coaches that I worked alongside, Mike Potenza and Brian Miller, all three of them just kind of approached me as, the more that I showed I was capable of, the more responsibilities they gave me. And so that basically ended up resulting in, I had, I think, like 6 or 7 teams that really I would run all their sessions as a student, So I was doing all that. But anyways, through that time with them, they all knew my boss and ultimately mentor with the Bulls, Eric Helland. So they had connected me with him during my last year of undergrad, and was fortunate. Eric brought me on to intern right out of college. But then the beautiful thing was Al was still around. It was, I believe it was his last year. I think he had maybe another 6 months or so after the time I left. But I spent about a year with Al, where he was on the tail end of a 5-year consulting agreement. So he wasn't full time with the team, but he still had his office and he was in every single day. Except I think it was like December or January, he went to California. He was like golfing in San Diego. So he was, definitely living the life. But it was just, it was an incredible opportunity for me. As you mentioned, Al is, I mean, you put him on the Mount Rushmore,
no doubt.
of the best to ever do it, worldwide, in a team sports setting. And I think the thing that really stood out to me, I was 22 at the time, and Al was, I think, in his maybe mid 60s at that time, and just his hunger and his thirst for knowledge and to learn, and his curiosity was just off the charts. Like, here was somebody who, he won a Super Bowl ring with the 49ers with, Bill Walsh and Joe Montana and that whole crew. He won 6 NBA championships, with the Bulls and Phil Jackson and MJ and, that whole team. And to this day, unless I'm missing something, he's the only coach to ever do that, to have a Super Bowl ring and NBA championship rings. And, oh, by the way, he was also the head strength coach for the Chicago White Sox. So when he started out, he started Bulls, and Al's a brilliant. One of the things people don't know, or they might not realize offhand, Al is a brilliant entrepreneur. He's a brilliant business mind. And so one of the things he did at the time when he was leaving the 49ers is he was not going to accept a position with the Bulls unless Jerry Reinsdorf himself hired Al, the owner. Yeah. Because his thing was like, no way am I being hired by the coach, because a coach could be gone in a year.
Right.
But even the front office, the GM, there's a little bit more stability, but the person with the ultimate stability is obviously the owner. So Al came in and he was hired directly by Jerry Reinsdorf. And then as part of that, you got to think this is, mid 80s. The White Sox didn't have a strength coach either. So, Al was doing kind of dual duty initially there with the White Sox and the Bulls, and running his own business. He had what was it, like Vermeil Sports and Fitness?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. Something like that.
And so, he actually had several like high level NFL players would train with them in the off season, players from the Bears, a lot of high school athletes, all this. So, anyways, Al's done everything. He's at the end of his career. He's retired. He's, whatever. And this was someone who, to this day, I've never been around anyone who was, more driven to learn and ask questions. And, it was just incredible. Like, he's asking me questions as a 22-year-old, like I don't know any, he's asking me, well, how would you do this? What do you think about this? He's asking me about places I've been. And then, the other thing is I'd always be up there in his office. Al would, he'll finger punch, for typing. So, he'd always, and I'm not that much better, but he'd always have me like type emails for him. He'd dictate it for me. But he's like every single day reaching out to some of the top experts in the world, just asking them questions, or he's read an article that they just came out with, and he has like a few points of feedback for them, but it's all like in the spirit of curiosity and learning. And I mean, it was just incredible to see that. Like, he's done absolutely everything. He's retired, and yet he's hungrier to learn than, any young coach I've ever been around, really anybody I've ever been around. But the gift, the greatest gift from Al was like, he didn't just like it sounds like, oh, you're dictating his emails or, typing his emails, all this busy work. But the whole time, Al always made sure that, anytime you spent with him was going to be valuable. Anything you did for him to help him out, to put his PowerPoints together or, whatever, he was always going to go out of his way to pour into you, to help you learn, to make sure you learn. Even if you weren't asking questions, Al's going to start telling you stuff that you need to learn or things you need to think about or, all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, it was just, and not only that with coaching, but, he taught me how to treat people. He taught me how to, how you treat kind of your play, him obviously along with Eric Helland, who was my boss, who, Eric was Al's assistant. Eric was Al's first ever assistant, late 80s, and Al groomed Eric to ultimately take over for him. And actually a lot of people don't know this, but it was the mid 90s. Al really stepped aside and let Eric run the show. And the reason for that, one, Al is the most egoless, leader or coach that you could ever possibly be around. Like, none of it was about him. Like, he didn't care the perception. He didn't care any of that. He saw, because Eric, you could put Eric, like 2 of the 4 people on Mount Rushmore could be Al and Eric, quite honestly. I mean, Eric's as good as it gets. And he saw that in E, where it was like, for Eric to continue to grow, it was his time to take over the program. And so then Al kind of, stepped aside to allow for that, and he just, that was one of the things he taught me about, empowering the people that are working with you. But then beyond that, like, if you're managing someone, whether it be an intern, an assistant, or whoever it is, if anything goes wrong, if they screw anything up, it's on you. 100% is on you. Because either, like, you shouldn't have delegated that to them in the first place. It might be one thing, like they weren't ready for it, so it's on you. Or most likely they probably were, but you needed to give them more clarity. You needed to give them more direction. There was something that you needed to do better. And I think oftentimes, people do that and they look to, I'm going to place blame. And that was one of the things that Al taught me was, and he'd always pull me aside and kind of teach me these lessons. But he was like, when, one day you're going to have assistants, working kind of quote unquote under you, interns and, other people, your job, like, anything that goes wrong, that's on you. You accept responsibility for that. Anything that goes right, you give them the praise, and he was one of the first people that, really made a point and kind of taught me that. He taught me the value of relationships as the foundation. I mean, Al was the master of this. He was having, these guys were on top of the world. He'd have team dinners. He'd have the whole Chicago Bulls team over to his house. His wife would cook them dinner, awesome. It was just incredible, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love hearing about people who are at the peak, at the height of everything and still hungry to get to know more, to learn more, and never being satisfied, because I see so many people, well, that's good enough for now, or I'm in a place where I'm comfortable, so I don't need to push myself anymore. And the truly great ones are always hungry for more. And so, well, I could probably spend all day talking to you about your time with the Bulls and Albertville and all that. Let's get to kind of what I wanted to get into with the guests here today is the post you made on Twitter. It was one of your threads that you put out there with imposter syndrome. I found it incredibly insightful, and I imagine that there's something that somebody and all of my listeners can take away from this. So let's dig into that a little bit, if you would, and kind of go through what exactly is imposter syndrome, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I think most simply, I guess how I think about it with imposter syndrome is, it's sort of this, kind of internal belief system and or self-doubt where, internally you're kind of fighting against yourself and sort of this fear of being exposed as a fraud, this fear that, no matter any success that you might be having, you're sort of internally looking around, and it's like it's only a matter of time before people figure out that, like, I'm only here by luck, or like I'm only, and you almost kind of rationalize any of your success, and you sort of, and it can manifest in many forms, but you ultimately, oftentimes will end up with kind of a fear of, maybe putting yourself out there more, maybe a fear of saying yes to, like a new opportunity, because there's sort of that, like, what if factor, the like, well, what if, I go and maybe it's early in your career, and you get asked to speak to a high school team, even like whatever it might be, and you're like, well, shoot, like I probably, I don't know why they're asking me, like, and then what results is this kind of paralysis oftentimes of doing anything, or if you do eventually put yourself out there, it's kind of that voice, in your head where, like, whether it's, maybe something like this, even, having a conversation one-on-one, speaking, on a podcast, or maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's coaching, maybe it's, it could be leading a meeting at work, giving a presentation in school. It could be many, many different things. And, what it can kind of lead to is it can lead to really also freezing kind of in those moments, rather than being in the moment, because you're so caught up with, how are other people thinking of me right now, and like, what if I say something stupid, or what if, these people I'm talking to, like, they know more than I do, so what if I explain this, the wrong way? And if you're caught up in your own head like that, it's really going to, as you can imagine, limit your performance quite drastically, because you're not able to just be fully present, be in the moment. Like, when we think about, you think about when you do your best work in anything, and when you kind of study it, the psychology and science of a lot of it is, it's ideally really when you achieve kind of flow state, and when
Mhm.
you're in flow state, it's like athletes talk about it, of like being in the zone, but you can be in flow state, like, while you're reading, or while you're writing, or while you're having a conversation, especially if it's a really interesting conversation, and maybe it's something you're passionate about, or you're interested in, or whatever, and you just kind of lose yourself to that moment. That's when you do your best work. That's when you shine. That's when you perform your best. When you think about, an athlete maybe having to hit some free throws at the end of the game, it's something that has become routine and automated for them. But in that moment, if they start to get outside of it, if they start to think about, well, all the what ifs, they start to think in the past, or think in the future. They start to think, like, 2 games ago, I got to the line and I missed the free throw, and we lost the game as a result. So what if I miss again? Then versus if they're just in the moment, now they're not thinking, it's automated, and typically they're gonna, fall back on the work that they've put in, and, you know, um, kind of represent themselves at that level. But even oftentimes, we sort of outperform that, because in this flow state, you also create a lot of times, sort of spontaneous creativity and connections that, you know, maybe we didn't know were there. So I know I kind of probably jumped the gun there leading
No, that's
into
good.
some things, but yeah, I mean, the overarching is just this fear that, and it's an unspoken fear, as you can imagine. It's not
Right.
like, you know, it's not like we're gonna go around talking about and telling people like, man, I'm really worried I'm going to get exposed as like a fraud. Like people are going to figure me out. Like I'm just a fraud. I'm an imposter. Because like, if you tell somebody that and you believe that you're a fraud, then like inherently, like you've just admitted, you know, you're a fraud.
Mhm.
So oftentimes, especially when we don't have an awareness that this is really a quite common thing, we keep it to ourselves. We internalize, we ruminate, and it just kind of leads us further down that path. And what you find actually is a lot of times the more success you have, the louder this voice gets, because the more you worry about like, now I'm kind of climbing this quote unquote mountaintop, and you just worry about like somebody's going to pull the rug out from under you and it's all going to come crashing down.
Right. So do you find that it's something that happens more often in like early success or late success, or does it not even matter? It's just kind of one of those things that pops up periodically, just depending on thoughts in certain situations.
Yeah. I think again, I think it kind of depends, and also what is success. It's
Right.
all relative.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, shoot, even before I was in in college, before I did anything, I convinced the high school basketball coach in my hometown to let me run their off-season training program. I think I was maybe a sophomore or junior in college. I didn't have any credentials, any certifications, anything, so it's like, and I think I got paid a little bit, but it wasn't, nothing, certainly nothing crazy. But like, even that right there is like, okay, you do all this to in my case, to, convince this head coach to let me run the program. And in the grand scheme, it's not a big deal. It's Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Like nobody's ever even heard of my high school. You know what I mean? Like it's not like perennial powerhouse. Like we've gone to state, stuff like that, but we're not, but for me, like in that moment, it's like, oh crap. Like now I'm here. Now I actually have to like show up and coach these, like, it was, for me, it was like kids going into ninth grade on up to 12th grade. And I was whatever, I was probably 19, 20 years old. But now it's like, man, these little 8th graders are going to find out that I'm you know what I mean? So
Right.
I think it can happen really along any level. I think, at least from some of the research that I've read, and some of the different resources I've sort of looked into, I think there is a pretty common theme with quote unquote high achievers. So you see people with maybe a ton of educational credentials, like multiple master's degrees or a PhD, or like business success, like CEOs, VPs, like high level people, who, it's like the more they climb, the more that they're like looking around, because now you've, over time, like you're building a comfortable life. You're maybe being seen as an authority in at least some circles, whether it's your workspace or maybe more broadly, or, at school, or, whatever it is. So I think it's like, if you don't have that awareness, I think it's actually probably going to continue to get maybe a little bit sort of louder, a little bit worse, the more success you have. But also I think there starts to come a point where now you maybe even really become afraid to take different risks, to like put yourself out there, so you kind of settle in, because like this right here is comfortable,
Mhm.
so there's also that like fear of failure, and part of it is like, some of the growth mindset, fixed mindset of, you'll see it in, say like with athletes, especially if their identity early on has been like, if they were like a like prodigy, either in sport or in school. Now, if you think about it, like any conversation that they've had with family, with friends, or if they're out with their parents, is like we had a really high level Olympic diver that I coached at Purdue for 4 years. Who's, I mean, an absolute stud, silver medalist, Olympian, and how old? I mean, he was like 18. But he, if you think about it, his whole life from the time he was like 6 years old, anywhere you went, like his parents are bragging about what an amazing diver he is. He's this incredible diver. He's an incredible diver. So his identity starts to become that. And part of it is you start to think, oh, it's just like, maybe I'm a natural, either you have it or you don't. So you start to remove maybe work from the equation. But also it's like, well, if I really put myself out there, or if I compete at a higher level and someone beats me, now this thing that is my identity, I've just failed at. So now, because that's what I identify with, that also makes, kind of me a failure. So, I think, and you're touching on related sort of psychological concepts that, that touch it.
Right.
So, but I think the key with it all is, really first knowing that even it exists, like do a little bit of homework to understand it. But then beyond that, you start to almost kind of normalize it by knowing that, like, there's all these like insanely like talented, successful, brilliant people who, like, there's no way possible that they should be thinking like, oh man, somebody's going to find out I'm a fraud, external. Like that's what we look at and we see. And so then you start to go, well, man, if this person, as successful as they are, as like smart as they are, or, whatever, if they, they feel this way, like it almost becomes like empowering, and it leads you more into the, like, I think when you get to like that, like F it, where you're just like who cares? Like I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna put myself out there. I'm gonna work at it. I'm gonna take some L's here and there, but nothing great is really gonna happen without you putting yourself out there like that and going through some of those failures, going through, because that's where a lot of the learning is gonna happen if you let it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So curiosity question, it's going to be kind of a tangent off of some of this here. Do you feel like it's possible that some of the imposter syndrome stuff where you start to maybe back off from doing things because of fear of failure or being exposed could lead to some of those like high level athletes getting what we, you hear people call like the yips? Do you think that's possible that they kind of link together in some extent, or do you think it's kind of a separate deal with that situation? Because like you look at like Tiger Woods, for example, obviously he's won forever, and then all of a sudden now he can't hit a drive, or he can't hit a putt, or
right. I mean, and again, like obviously I don't have the psychology or like clinical credentials, but I just I read a ton on human psychology and all that sort of stuff. So kind of piecing together all the different things that sort of I've studied and I've read, and high level both coaches, psychologists, leaders that I've learned from, and anecdotally working with a lot of really high performers. I think it's, it can definitely be part of potentially that root cause, because, I think, and again, when you look at, I think maybe it's Andrew Saya. I can't remember the author offhand right now, but there's a book called Bounce. And the author of that book is formerly like a world-class table tennis player. I believe in England is where he grew up, but it became world class. And through that, he really started to study elite performance, and kind of what went through it, because he had his own kind of battles of like, as he was the best in his little small town. He kind of worked as, now he's the best in his region. And now as he continued to rise, he I think kind of got to a point where it was like, all of a sudden, like, he didn't know how to play table tennis anymore, and it was so much of it was, it was really mental. And in that book, and and a lot of other people talk about this as well, but he talked about a lot of the science of kind of choking. He also talked about being in the zone or flow state. And I think those two things are a bit, opposite ends of the same spectrum. Like, you look at like, as you alluded to in baseball, I think it was like Rick Ankiel is really famous for that. Of like, all of a sudden like, he couldn't even throw the ball to the catch, or
right.
My guy,
Chuck Knobloch.
Yeah, Chuck Knobloch. My guy John Lester.
Yeah,
like the most incredible pitcher, but somehow he can't throw the ball to first base. Like, you're
right.
like, what?
Right.
But I think what, at least in this book, anyways, he talks about in terms of a lot of the the science of choking is going back to a lot of the, like, if you've studied in particular, like Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman's work on like behavioral economics and like thinking fast and slow, what they talk about, and others as well. But like, I think that they're kind of the, I guess, like grandfathers of it, so to speak, in a lot of ways, is like system 1 and system 2 brain, where, system 1 is, and that's also where like system 1 takes over for like any of our heuristics and like mental shortcuts of where, like, we make quick, often irrational decisions, but sometimes we've developed this over time as a, survival instinct. It's like, rather than like wait around to figure out if that rustling in the bush was actually a lion, we just like developed an association that like rustling in the bush could be something that eats me and kills me. Right. So I better just go freaking run, and like, it's like the wind might have blown, but right. I'm not gonna, to survive, I don't necessarily have the time to go investigate, and because then I could go look, and if it's a lion, I'm done, Right. And so, that's obviously evolved over time. The other part of where, system 1 has evolved is to kind of, unlock us to be able to kind of take on more and more complex tasks and things like that. So, and this ties back into also, flow state, because, flow state is sort of, as it relates to, we talk about flow state in performance, I think is where it's most, most publicly discussed, is like, a player goes, like Klay Thompson drops whatever he had in that quarter, like 40 points in a quarter, right. Didn't miss a shot, took 2 dribbles.
Yeah,
like,
that one.
He was, he and like when you ask him about it immediately after, he can't really talk about, what just happened. Like he was in the zone, right. But flow state also occurs in, training and learning, whether it's, I might be learning material for, say, a test, or I might be learning how to play the piano, or I might be, if it's basketball, I'm working on a new skill. Where the greatest learning occurs, where the greatest development of these skills occurs, is in this sweet spot where, if it's too easy, like, it's just boring because there's no challenge, and B, like, we're not getting any better. Like, you see it with video games. Video games hook you because they get you into flow state. It's like the levels, like the first level, you're just learning, like Sonic the Hedgehog. The first level, I'm just learning, like, oh, when I jump, he turns into a ball with these sharp, his mohawk, and he like
Right.
can, kill the little bots. And then, but I'm like learning, and the first level is easy. And then I level up, and level, but then I lose, and like losing is what kind of keeps me coming back. But if it's, so there's this sweet spot where if it's too hard, and all I'm ever doing is failing at the task, then I just get frustrated. So then I'm just going to stop completely. So flow state is that sweet spot in between where, I'm going to get it right at least some of the time, but I really got to focus and kind of problem solve, whether it's a new skill, whether it's, like I said, playing a musical instrument or whatever it is. But then over time, I level up, so if it is that skill, maybe it's shooting, initially it's like in close and, just spot shooting. Then all of a sudden it's off one dribble. Then all of a sudden it's, off a dribble shot fake. And, but little by little, I'm sort of turning these things from being system 2, where I really have to think, and kind of problem solve. And, I got to think about where do my feet need to be. And all of this, to over time with repetition, it becomes system 1, it becomes automated. And that's where we say, people say, fall back on your practice, fall back on the work, fall back on, but that's where, I think that trick of psychology comes in. And like one of the things I always talk about, especially as it relates to coaching athletes, but even just like, leading people in general, like it could be in sport, it could be in the workplace, it could be, with your students or peers or, colleagues. Confidence is the greatest gift that you can give anyone, because, I think that's what happens, like going back to your question on like the yips and kind of the science of choking, is what ends up happening when you look at the science is, or say it's Tiger Woods or some golfer, it's a 3-foot putt. They can do that, and like literally they can blindfold themselves and, do it 1,000 times, and they're going to make all 1,000. And then all of a sudden it's on the 18th green to win at Augusta, and they miss it to the left by 2 inches, or they leave it short or whatever. It's because in that moment, they've gone into this, like they're not present with the current moment. And so now this automated skill that they've developed and hardened over time in this very moment has become system 2, where now they're thinking about it. Now they're like, and you see it in basketball with a free throw shooter who is, and it's funny because like, we would have this even with like our guys at Purdue or with the Bulls, and every fan inherently is like, well, don't you guys work on like every basketball team on the planet, you shoot like 1,000 free throws at the end of practice.
Right.
And if you play basketball at even a remotely high level, it doesn't matter who the guy is. Like they're in practice when nobody's around, they're just going to get in a rhythm. They don't care. They're going to hit 80% plus, but then all of a sudden they're like a 50% free throw shooter in a game setting. But it's a lot of the psychological. And I think oftentimes where the mistake occurs in coaching is it's like, okay, let's just shoot more free throws. And it's like, no, it's not that they don't have the skill. Like, let's identify what the root cause is.
Right.
And here, in the majority case is probably not that they don't have the skill or they don't have the mechanics. It's probably more so they've kind of gotten into their own head. So how do we focus and kind of bring them back to the current moment? And like when I was at Purdue in particular, it's funny because a lot of the work that we would do, that I would do with our guys, it was like, yeah, like they'd come in to like, lift weights, sprint, condition, like whatever the heck we were doing there. But then we would spend hours and hours and hours in my office having these type of discussions to, help them when it came time and there's, 20,000 people in the arena and we're on the road and they turn the ball over and now it's getting, loud, and now they go into a shell of themselves to find whatever their trigger was, to find their anchor, and to bring themselves, back into the moment.
Right.
So I know we led down this path with imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, I think, is something where it's like, it's just in your head, where
Yeah.
even just like you're sleeping or you're sitting around at home, versus like there's another element of it where it's like all of a sudden maybe it's triggered by the stress of, an event, or, but all these different things, I think, come back to, being out of the moment, and taking yourself from system one to system two. And it's even when you look at, like science of happiness or depression or things like that, a lot of that stuff is because people are ruminating. They're ruminating about the past and what was, or they're ruminating about the future and what could be. It's like one day your boss doesn't say hello to you when you pass by, or like in the parking lot you drove by each other and they didn't say hello to you. So then all of a sudden you're like, man, my boss didn't say hi to me. Man, he might be mad at me. Oh yeah, that's right. 2 weeks ago in this meeting, like I wasn't prepared when he had. So man, he must be like thinking about, and then all of a sudden it leads down this path where it's like he's going to fire me. And it's like, no, actually he drove by, he was looking down at his phone and legitimately didn't see you. But we don't even like stop to consider, that might be a thing. It's just like our natural, kind of path takes us down this like negative spiral. So like I said, I'll stop there. I've gone down a bunch of different
No, you're
tangents,
good.
but it's just, there's so many different, I think, elements or variables to it.
Right. And no, I like the going down the rabbit hole. I think that's kind of fun sometimes because you end up getting a more explained version of things or some tidbits that you otherwise wouldn't have hit on. But it sounds like a lot of it kind of comes back to like fear, because, if you're not in the moment and you're thinking about the past or you're thinking about the future, there's a chance for fear to creep in. But when you're in the moment, there is no fear. You're just doing, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So let's go back into the imposter syndrome stuff here, because there were, what was it? There were 5 types of imposter syndrome. I kind of wanted to go over those just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
So you started with like the perfectionist. So explain the perfectionist and kind of how that works.
Yeah. So, I think with, and this is, I think a lot of it's going to depend on the different researchers that you look at or you talk to. Some will tell you this is an oversimplified version. Some might say it's an overcomplicated version. But I can't remember offhand now the exact researcher, but it's someone who's kind of popularized these sort of 5 archetypes. And I thought, did a really good job of that breakdown where you can start to identify maybe some of these things in, kind of yourself and others. Yeah. I think the perfectionist is someone where, you almost overcompensate, for that fear of being found out. So it's like, I'm worried about every little last, insignificant detail. And like, and that's the one where it becomes much more of, I would say kind of a paralysis around, sort of like if you want to do something, or you want to put yourself out there, or you want to take a chance, take a leap at something, you kind of become paralyzed and you wait for every condition to be just right, to be just perfect, rather than, and I think like the thing that I resonate with, because for me, like the tendencies of like, quote unquote, the perfectionist is a lot of where, I think I kind of fall. And so something that continually I try to remind myself, is this idea of, done is better than perfect. I'm a big Cubs fan. And, Joe Madden and Theo Epstein, I think they did a lot of work around some of this type of stuff. as they rebuilt that culture, you got to think 2012, you know, or whatever. I think it was right around 2012 when Theo took over. I mean, you know, Cubs are the worst team, the lovable losers.
Right.
And they changed that. And a big part of how they changed that was, you know, this idea of like done is better than perfect. And like also having some fun with it of like Joe Madden's big thing was like, try not to suck. You know, it was just like this playful thing of like, you know, it's fun, like, but put you, you know, kind of put yourself out there. You know, and I think, so for me, it's kind of like, you know, that's what I look at as being the anecdote or antidote, so to speak, is, you know, kind of just start, you know, and realize that is no matter how much time you spend on it, it's not going to be perfect. You know, and it's important to obsess about details, but making sure, like, are you obsessing over the right details? But also, like, you know, it's also the concept of like, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Yeah.
It's like you're not going to get there. Like you're not going to get to this finished product that's like excellent and like, you know, whatever, without going through all the rough, you know, rough patches along the way, you know, whatever it might be.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you said you see yourself kind of in that perfectionist thing. I see myself kind of in the soloist, and you know, yeah, like I don't like to ask people for help. I like to do it on my own. But as I'm getting older, I'm like, you know what, this isn't the way to do things because there's so many great people out there that can give me feedback to make myself better. And so the soloist is kind of the guy who is always by themselves, right? They want to make sure that they're doing a great job, but they want to do it without any help because if they ask for help, then they're seen as a fraud, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, you know, I think, and that's where you see, and, you know, I think it's so powerful to like kind of understand some of this stuff because, you know, of course we're going to see some of it in ourselves. But whatever you do, you know, whether you, maybe you coach, maybe you manage people, maybe you teach, you know, students, or maybe you are a player yourself, you know, you have a coach or you have a boss. I think it's powerful to start to understand some of these constructs because it's also going to help you to like help unlock these other people. And yeah, like the, you know, I think the soulless is like you said, is, you know, it's not that you're not maybe asking for help because you're like, oh man, like I don't want to burden these other people. But it's like, I'm not going to ask for help or I'm not going to ask a question here because then if I ask for help, then that's going to expose the fact that I need help or I don't know or I, you know, and so, you know, I think, you know, especially as it relates to helping other people is really reframing and like praising the idea of asking for help, you know,
Right.
like, and I think it's, you know, there, you know, over time maybe is a negative stigma at times that has built up kind of in society around, you know, asking for help or like, you know, what if I ask a dumb question, you
Yep.
know, and things like that. You know, I think you'll also find people like that, just anecdotally, you know, they might ask a question, but they're always going to apologize. They're going to be like, sorry, you know, like, sorry, just, you know, one question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've, you know, and it's like you're apologizing for it. Like, don't apologize for your question. You know, just ask ask your question, and understand. You know, I think part of it too is like in our society, and all the different books and success stories that you read, like, you know, the movies we watch about, you know, whoever different, you know, successful person, it's made to be about the individual hero. It's the individual's journey. And like, we leave out the fact, like, you know, we talk about Einstein, you know, and it's like, Einstein was this like, you know, lone genius. And it's like, no, like Einstein had all kinds of people around him, supporting him, helping him build these things. He's kicking off with back and forth. He's asking for help, you know, all this sort of stuff. So I think that's the other thing is kind of normalizing it and getting away from this sort of falsehood of, kind of like the individual or like lone success story. Like that
Right.
just doesn't happen. Like we
Yeah.
talk about it that way, but it doesn't happen that way. There are people that shape, their path to get them there, to prop them up.
Right. Like even Batman has an Alfred, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, speaking Batman, the next one I want to talk about was the superhero. So let's kind of dig into that one a little bit.
Yeah. So, I think with that one, it's they're really gonna kind of like use their work as a cover for their insecurities, so they're very much gonna be the person who, like, they're gonna work, like all, like, late into the night, early morning. They're gonna be kind of obsessive there. They're gonna crave that kind of external validation and kind of praise, for their work. Like,
Gotcha.
I think one of their greatest fears is, kind of being exposed, for that, for like kind of not being good enough, where it's like, they're just obsessively going to work because they feel like, almost like, on the wrong end of the spectrum, where it's like, like no matter how much they work, like it's never going to be good enough, as well.
Gotcha.
And so then that's also someone who, very much, if if you're giving kind of critical feedback or constructive criticism, they're really going to internalize on that. They're really going to, oftentimes they might shut down, as a result of that, and that's something where I think it's heightened with, say, somebody like that. But, I think in general, like one of the things that, I think there's an art to giving feedback. There's an art to receiving feedback, but in giving feedback, I think if you're thoughtful, and one of the things I always talk about is, make the positive personal, make the negative technical.
Okay.
So the positive, make it about them, make it about what they did, make it, and try to tie it to, the maybe the effort or the work that they put to make that possible. Like it didn't just happen, it wasn't just like a natural thing. But the negative, make it more technical, make it more like focus on maybe the problem, focus on the science, focus on, maybe use other anecdotes or other, kind of deflect it off of them to give the example, or to give the learning. I think, or it's kind of make it about like we or us, or make it about me, be like, hey, this is on me. Like, here's a piece of feedback. Really, this is on me. Like, I didn't articulate this, to you as well as I could have. So I could imagine, why you may have done it this way, or why you may have missed on X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. There's tactics like that you can take where that's also going to disarm sort of the other person, where the second you make it about you and you take ownership, and they're going to mirror you in a way where it opens them up to say, no, like it's not on you. Like, I knew what I needed to do there. I just didn't get it done, blah, 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 blah. Here's, and now they're going to be more open to kind of learning. Whereas otherwise, they're probably going to do one of two things. They're going to go into a shell and sort of shut down. Or they're going to be, combative, defensive, and, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Like,
right.
So yeah, there's definitely an art to it there.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. The next one here is the natural genius. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think, and this is kind of like, a little bit the example that I talked about with one of my former divers where, it was the prodigy where like he's
mhm.
always been known as like, he was a, best diver in his diving club. Then he's the best diver, in the region. Then he's the best diver in the state. And then he's the best diver in the Midwest. And then, and so on and on and on. But everyone, talks about him as, almost like being a natural being, so this is someone where they're going to be, more fixed minded, and they're going to be like, they're going to judge everything based on, kind of their competence or sort of, their achievements define their worth, kind of self-worth. So it's like, if there's anything that doesn't come like quick to them, that doesn't come easy, that like they have to work at, they're also gonna like probably try to avoid anything like that. But B, then it's like they're gonna explain away or they're gonna rationalize, why it took them so much time, because the fact that it took them so much time could expose that like their sort of natural genius or their natural talent is actually a fraud, because like they weren't able to just snap their fingers and solve this problem, or snap,
Right.
like it with the like just all of a sudden like he does a new, more complicated dive, which, as you keep going up levels, like to win in your city, he could
Mhm.
probably do a pretty basic dive. To win in the region needs to be, and then all of a sudden national competition or international competition, like you better throw 3 twists along with that and like no
Right.
splash whatsoever, and so it's like now, like in order to do that, obviously there's
Mhm.
going to be a lot of work that's involved to get there. It's not just going to come, kind of quick and easy. And so I think that's the one where a lot of it is, again, reframing around especially language and growth mindset versus fixed mindset, which, one of the things is like yet, like maybe I'm not good at this yet, or I don't know
Right.
how to do this yet, or if I'm coaching someone else, saying that same thing,
Mhm.
especially if you are giving feedback, it's, adding those 3 letters, that kind of yet on the back end of it, almost gives kind of permission of like, and also, the awareness that it's not fixed.
Right.
This, it's not an all or none. It's kind of, and you see this oftentimes, and you hear this a lot of times. People are like, "Oh yeah, like I'm just not good at math," or like, "Man, this person, they're a math whiz." It's like, well, you're not, maybe you're not good at math yet,
Right.
or whatever, whatever your situation is, because you have the power to influence it. You have the power to control that. Like you just,
Mhm.
but it's all in kind of your mindset and how you frame it. But I think you can help other people by how, again, you give them that feedback, or the language that you use, with other people.
Yeah, no, I find myself having to use yet a lot in the
Yeah.
weight room setting because I get my
Mhm.
athletes in here and they're like, I can't do this. I go, no, you're just not good at it yet. Like
Yep.
I've there's a reason why we're doing this now is because you've advanced past
Right.
the basic
Right.
movements. We're trying
Right.
to add
Right.
new
Right.
things. So
Right.
um the last one here is the expert. So let's touch on that
Hmm.
one a little bit.
Yeah. So, I think with that, it's someone where it's like they're gonna get exposed because they don't know enough or they didn't do enough. Like they can sort of never achieve enough. They can never, know enough. It's how much they know or how much, they can do. And I think again there, that's, similar a little bit, as, in some sense, I think there's some similarities there, maybe as like, the natural genius. There may even be some tendencies or similarities of the soulless. Like, and that's where I think like a lot of these archetypes,
Yeah.
again, they're not absolutes, and any of us and at any given moment and in different arenas or areas of expertise, or, we may have different elements of each that, kind of present. So, I think there's elements here too of kind of also being okay with like, I don't know, being, kind of a powerful thing. I think the other thing too is like, you can almost bring in the idea of like, which is really intimidating and overwhelming, but of like, the more you learn, the less it turns out that actually, because now the more you learn, the more you realize how much more there is to know, and so I think that can be intimidating, and that can be, self-limiting at times, because it's like, it's very comfortable in this sort of, another, kind of like heuristic or construct is like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like you have these people who know next to nothing, but they know so little that they're so confident and convinced of what they know that, they parade around as experts. And it's like, it's a really, really comfortable thing. It's also a really, really dangerous thing, because it's like, like you're kind of missing here. Whereas like, and you see this quite often, it's, like Al as a perfect example. Like, I mean, I would put Al toe to toe with anyone on this planet with anything related to human performance, toe to toe. But yet, if you talk to him, he would just tell you like how much he doesn't know, how much, and he's, so, I think that's one of the things is starting to develop a comfort there of like, I don't know is quite powerful. I don't know, but I'll find out.
Right.
And understanding the more you know, or the more you learn, the less, you actually know, because you realize how much more there is to know. The better maybe you get at something, the more there is, like, now you've leveled up, so it's actually just going to get harder. It's interesting, like in building a business and being a startup world, like that's one of the things that's very true, is like, right at the point at which you start to be like, I'm getting my feet under me, I'm figuring this out, like I'm getting pretty good at this, like you just get slammed. Because now through your success, you've earned the right to level up and do more. And now it becomes, and it sort of just becomes, harder at each level. So I think part of it is embracing that. And I think the other part is, again, accepting the fact that like you're not, and none of us will, you're never going to know everything.
Right.
And so that's where it's like, how can you kind of balance and support and offset some of those things? And so that's where it's like, surrounding yourself with great counsel, with whether it be great mentors, great resources, where can you go when that thing comes up? Because part of it, with, kind of being the expert, is you sort of prepare for all these things that like could come up, but will come up in like a 1% use case. But you spend, all kinds of time so that if and when it ever occurs, like you're ready for it. Where it's like, it's going to be way more valuable to build the relationships, to have this council of, experts, or to like know where to go, so that, when that thing comes up, like I can go to the best person I know on this topic, or, and that was something I learned from Eric and Al as well, is like, they had formed a, kind of tribe or a council around them, where it was like, if we were talking speed development, they had Charlie Francis on speed dial, but not just Charlie Francis. They actually had like, 5, 6 of the bet, like, Dan Paff, Lawrence Seager, like,
right.
So they'd even get a rounded perspective there, but even like, Al, one of the people I met while I was with Al, he flew in, the guy's like the top nerve specialist in the world. like he knows more about, the nerve and like neural connection. That's where I learned about like neural flossing and all this sort of stuff. But it was like Al himself like knows a surface level of it, but then he knows enough to like have the conversation, but then it's like when something presents where it could be neural, then he's got Michael Shacklock on speed dial. And Michael Shacklock has spent his entire life and career understanding neurodynamics, and so it's like, that's who he's going to go to. Or they had, Louis Simmons or, Mel Siff or Carmelo Bosco or, all these different and top level psychologists, top level physical therapists, all these different people, so I think you see it, with great athletes as well, as starting to understand, like MJ, where he unlocked his true greatness was he understood to start to be able to delegate, but also empower those people. And like, actually I saw something, I think yesterday, somebody talked about, for yourself, as you continue to grow, to unlock what you're capable of, one of the things you have to start to be okay with is, offloading things that other people can do and knowing that they're going to do it, especially starting out, maybe 70% to the level that you do it. But then if you can empower them and teach them a little and bring them along to even just get them 10% more to 80%, and then just be okay with that, because then it's going to free you to do so much more. But I think also in practice, especially in like a work setting, in an entrepreneurial setting, like whether it's a like a high performance staff, or like, in our case, building a company, it's like, what I've seen is all these coaches that we brought on board, now 3 years later, like the best example of this is the first coach I ever hired, Renee Zernicke, who actually coincidentally, she worked under Eric Helland at Wisconsin for 3 years before she came on board. So we didn't know each other, but shared mentor.
Right.
That's how we came together. And so she came on board my first month at Future. We were in a little basement office, like no website, no but like, we're going to change the world. But it's kind of a pipe dream at that point. And from day one, I continually just worked with her and had conversations with her to set her up, like, to start to take things that I was doing where, at first she would take it and, at least in my opinion, wouldn't do it as well or to the level I wanted it done. But also part of that is realizing that, like, maybe she's going to do it a little bit differently than I would do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. So A, like getting comfortable with that, but then B, the first time maybe it's not on the level that I would like. So then you identify and you give that feedback, and you give a little bit more clarity and direction. Then you give her the task again. Now the second time it's a little closer, but then by the third time she should be able to just do it, take it, run with it, and then eventually she's going to make it her own because it's something that you've given her, that she has ownership of. And when you give someone else ownership of something, they're really going to kind of then pour themselves into it. So now they're going to actually take that thing, because also probably they have more time to think about it, to work on it, and they're going to make it even better than what you could have done. So I'll give you an example is early on, onboarding is a big part of what could make or break our company as we bring on new coaches. And now we're, approaching 125 coaches. So as you can imagine, for us to be successful as a company, it can't just be a free for all where we hire good people and just let them go completely. Figure it out.
Right.
It's just not going to work.
Right.
And so onboarding is a big piece. Well, early on, I'm the one building out our onboarding process. So I onboarded Renee, and then after that, our next couple of coaches, I still onboarded, but then I had Renee kind of do it with me, and then the next one was like, okay, now you do this one, but like, here's the structure to do it. And then throughout, I'm like, I'm biting my tongue on some things that she's doing differently, because I'm like, I wouldn't do it like that, but like, I gotta kind of let her, and then give her the feedback, then give her the next wave of coaches. She onboards them. It's a little better. And then all of a sudden, because now she's spending the time thinking about it, working on it, we're having conversations, she takes it and I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of half the things that you're doing now, but like the onboarding experience is so much more effective, productive, all of these things. And as it relates to the growth of our company, like she actually now has taken over as our head of performance. So like she runs all the day-to-day of our coaching team. And then I just manage her, but it's really more of a, our relationship. And I think you can probably tell my style is, if anything, I'm more of like a coach slash advisor to her.
Right.
So like we'll discuss different things, but then like if I say let's do A, B, and C, she says let's do X, Y, and Z. We'll talk it out. If I still say A, B, and C, she still says X, Y, and Z. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to support her. And over time now, because delegated, empowered her, and then there's a whole nother team under her that we've done similar type things, that they're taking different aspects, and collectively all of them are doing all of this stuff, 10 times better than I ever could. You know what I mean? And so I think, again, as I kind of digress, but that's a big part of it. Like, and that was, you see the great athletes, whether it be Kobe or MJ or whatever, they don't win at the highest level. Their true greatness isn't ultimately unlocked, or wasn't, until, MJ had to be able to like build up the confidence in Steve Kerr and John Paxson and also trust in himself to kick it, knowing that, they'll hit that shot, things like, I mean, obviously that's a microcosm, but it's, it's kind of those type of things.
No, yeah, I love that. I love how there's constant evolution in it all, and there's a trust factor, and it really sounds like it almost boils down to, when it comes to truly unlocking some of that, the different levels of what we are, is that self-awareness of who we are and how we can give the best version of ourselves to others, and then have that get back and forth. So I think that's a huge takeaway there. And I love the different deep dives into some stuff today, because I feel like that's something that we needed to hear, and I think that was awesome. So lastly, before I take any more of your time today, are there any social media accounts or areas that you would like to leave some of the listeners an ability to follow or connect with you?
Yeah. So, I've been trying to get more and more active on, especially with my Twitter account. It's just at J Bonhotal. So I'm trying to get, more active with putting out some different threads and things like that. But, just kind of thinking about how can I start to myself, share more content, share more, from the different experiences that I've had, both in, elite sport to now transitioning over to, tech and entrepreneurship and, startup world, building a company, raising money, and scaling a company, leadership, management, all these different things. So, kind of focusing on a lot of stuff that relates to unlocking that next level of performance for people, whatever that might mean, because it means, a little bit different things to each of us. So getting more active there. And then I haven't yet, but I'm starting to formulate some things to start to be more active with Clubhouse, and kind of hosting some different rooms and getting some interesting people within my network to have different discussions and stuff like that. So, on Clubhouse as well is just at J Bonhotal. But trying to start to do a mix of, keeping some of the threads coming, but I think, where I want to focus is, more of the discussion and like some short sound bites and things that can be digestible as takeaways. And I try to be as open and interactive as I can. So anybody that's like sending me messages or things like that, I always try to do my best to respond to every single direct message or reply or anything like that. So people can definitely reach out to me through there, and I'll do my best to be helpful, to be a resource any way I can.
Well, yeah, I mean, I greatly appreciate you reaching back out to me and then being a guest on the show today, because
of course,
this is some awesome content. We had some cool stuff we talked about with some great people that we've mentioned along the way, and obviously there's a lot more for me to dig into here and learn myself, but I felt like we touched on quite a bit, and that's a great start point for myself and a lot of the listeners to at least kind of start to get some awareness. So thank you again. I greatly appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars, fall flat on your face, but remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and join us again next time as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But no matter what happens, remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please take a moment now to subscribe, rate, and review our show. We are all on the edge of greatness.